Why is South Korea over?
This sounds brutal, but South Korea will soon start melting on all fronts. Demographically, economically, socially, culturally, and militarily. Because for decades, the country has been experiencing a fertility crisis unprecedented in human history. And we've probably reached a point of no return. By 2060, the South Korea we know and love today will no longer exist. What will the collapse look like? And why is it now almost impossible to stop? The real population bomb. To have a stable population, you need a fertility...
Is it worse than Japan? Oh, it is worse than Japan. Last I checked, it is definitely worse than Japan. And it has the same suicide rates as Japan, if not slightly higher than Japan, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Rate of about 2.1 children per woman.
It's cooked doubly.
In the 1950s, South Koreans used to have 6 children on average. In the 1980s, the rate fell below 2. And in 2023, it was 0.72 kids per woman, the lowest ever recorded in history.
You need to go move back and breed. But like, you know, here's the fucking issue, right? Like, why would anybody that gets raised in the fucking terrible dog-ass fucking cultural system in South Korea want to have kids and make them go through the same thing, right? Obviously, I don't think that's one of the biggest reasons as to why there's a fertility crisis there. But like, you know, even just thinking beyond the other issues, right? Like, just nobody fucking wants to do that. And you tack onto that just how much of a narcissist society South Korea really is. You know, a lot of people would rather just spend time and spend resources and money on themselves and experiences and stuff like that rather than fucking settling down and fucking, you know, actually making a family, right?
In Seoul, fertility is even lower, around 0.55. On average, about half of the women here won't have any kids.
A lot of the
and
problems
other
are
half
literally
just one.
made by Korea
What
themselves.
do these numbers actually mean in the real world? If fertility stays as it is, then 100 South Koreans will have 36 kids. When they grow up, they will have 13 kids, who will then have 5. Within 4 generations, 100 South Koreans will turn into 5. If we look at today's South Korean population pyramid, we see this is pretty real. There's only one 1-year-old for 4 50-year-olds. After 4 decades below the replacement level, the consequences were still largely invisible. Today, South Korea's population is at an all-time high, as are its workforce and its GDP, which is still growing. But demographics hits you like a freight train. You hear it vaguely in the distance, and then it runs you over. South Korea is about to be hit. Let's time travel 35 years into the future to 2060 and see what the country will look like then. When it comes to demographics, the most commonly used projections are those put together by the UN. They envisage 3 scenarios: low fertility, medium, and high. But in the past, all medium UN projections for South Korea have consistently been too positive. Between 2022 and 2023 alone, fertility in South Korea dropped by another 8%. So we're going to use the latest low fertility scenario, which has been the most accurate in the last few years. Keep in mind that we're still talking about projections, and the future is a faraway land. Okay, let's do it. In 2060, South Korea's population pyramid will look like this. The population will have shrunk by 30%. 16 million South Koreans will have disappeared in just 35 years. And it'll be the oldest country in human history. 1 in 2 South Koreans will be over the age of 65. Less than 1 in 10 will be under 25. And only 1 in 100 will be small children. Imagine waking up in a
Jesus
country
Christ.
where the streets are strangely quiet with no children playing on them. Entire cities have
Bobby,
been
better do
abandoned.
something, bro. Nothing
Half of
about
the
Korea makes
population
me
is
want to move there.
elderly and living either alone or in overcrowded retirement homes.
I wonder if this is
With a
gonna actually
minority
go
of
into
people
the
desperately
issues
trying
as
to
to
keep
why it
society
is this
running.
way.
There will be a few major consequences. Economic collapse. In 2023, a breathtaking 40% of South Koreans over 65 lived below the poverty line. But in 2060, this number may seem lovely in comparison. Today, South Korea has one of the largest pension funds in the world, worth about $730 billion US. But it's projected to stop growing in the 2040s and be completely depleted by the 2050s. So in 2060, pensions will have to be paid by the working population.
Oh,
Estimates vary,
shit.
but for a pension system to work, the minimum a society
A
needs
second
is
coming
between
of
2
Genghis
to 3
Khan would
workers
solve
per
their
retiree
issue.
paying for them with their taxes. But even if we assume that all South Koreans over 15 will be working in 2060, the country will have less than 1 worker per senior. Workers will be unable to stem the incredible costs. So not only will poverty among the elderly be common, but a big chunk will be forced to work. Except they may not be able to find jobs because by 2060, the South Korean economy may have collapsed. Broadly speaking, the size of an economy is linked to the size of its workforce. To have a big economy, you need a lot of workers to produce a lot of things and a lot more people to buy them. Today, South Korea has about 37 million people of working age, generating a GDP of about 1.7 trillion US dollars. But by 2060, its workforce would have shrunk to less than half, to about 17 million. Of course, technological progress means that productivity will be higher and each individual will probably produce more than today. But even if productivity keeps growing at the same rate or more than we've seen in the last decades, South Korea's GDP could peak in the 2040s. In other words, South Korea will enter a permanent economic recession. There are more optimistic projections that see the recession begin as late as 2050, but they're based on the medium UN demographic scenario, and there are no signs that we're heading there. Another factor in the economy is science, technology, and innovation, areas in which big leaps are typically made by young adults and the middle-aged. Young people have fresh ideas that contribute to the wealth of society. Significantly fewer people working also means way
I
less
wonder
tax
how
for the
many
government,
people in Korea
which will
are
be trapped between a rock and a
migrating
hard
out of
place.
Korea.
On the one
And
hand,
if that's,
having
like,
to provide for half
accelerating
the
at all,
population
too.
that are seniors, on the other, seeing its income diminish. It will be forced to shut down or cut essential services like hospitals or social benefits. Since infrastructure only works at scale, smaller communities may be abandoned as the country contracts into its metropolitan areas. And of course, there won't be enough money to invest in the future. This is bad. But what will happen to South Korean society and culture may be worse. Societal and cultural collapse. Speculating on how societies will develop is extra hard, but there are a few pretty unavoidable trends. Today, already about 20% of Koreans live alone. Also, 20% report having no close friends or relatives. By 2060, 50% of South Koreans aged 70 will have no siblings and 30% will have no children. Young adults between 25 and 35 will only make up 5% of the population and typically have no
Heard a
siblings at all.
problem? Chat, why do you think these happen? Do you think just all these 20% people just were born to be lonely or wanted to be alone? No, it's the society. It's the type of society that South Korea has pushed culturally for centuries, right? And that's what causes this. Like I said, almost all the issues South Korea has is a self-fulfilling prophecy from everything that they've done culturally till now for their people.
2060, 50%
Centuries? You mean decades? Do you really think South Korean culture only existed since it got liberated from fucking Japan? South Korean culture has existed for centuries. What are you talking about? South Korea, sure, as South Korea as we know it exists, right, since liberating from Japan, but like South Korea as that region with the cultures from the people have existed for way beyond that, right?
South Koreans aged 70 will have no siblings and 30% will have no children. Young adults between 25 and 35 will only make up 5% of the population and typically have no siblings at all. This leaves the elderly with almost no close family and young adults with little family and
was it back then? Bad back then? Oh, yeah, just Google country with the longest chain of slavery ever. It's South fucking Korea. South Korea had some of the most ridiculous hierarchical systems for their rich all the way to their poor. If you're either not born a noble, and sure, that applies to a lot of East Asian societies at that time as well, but like, you know, South Korea is just even long, you know?
a few potential friends, especially outside of big cities. A loneliness epidemic of epic proportions is all but guaranteed. On top of that, South Korean culture will probably experience a huge decline. In 2000, there were 17.5 million South Koreans between 25 and 45, and they made up 37% of
Like, here's the issue, right? Way back in South Korean culture, Essentially, you were either born a noble, and if you weren't born a noble, you had no fucking opportunities to ever get higher, right? Basically were never going to get a government job. You were never going to get into certain positions. You were never going to be able to do anything, right? Maybe the one thing you could sometimes do is join the any type of like military group, right? That's like one option, but generally you are not allowed, right? If you were born a slave, you are a slave forever. There's no release. The only release from slavery is if your owner released you, but they would never, right? And then beyond just slaves, there were also peasants, and peasants just were not, they were at a certain level as well, and you're just not allowed to interact with anything, right? And now you think, okay, but we live in modern age. That isn't a thing anymore. But it kind of is, right? So right now in South Korea, and it has been going on forever, essentially, if you don't pass a certain level of college exam and get into the top colleges, you are essentially marked for life as being only able to work jobs up to here forever. You have no upward mobility. You have no opportunity to break away. You are locked there forever, right? And then if you didn't even go to college, oh, God save you. You're not even getting to this level. You're staying at the rock bottom, right? So it's just like, even though all these systems are like from ancient times, they still fucking exist today, right? So isn't that everywhere? I wouldn't say that's everywhere. Like it's so much more black and white in Korea. I think other places there are other things you can do, right? Other opportunities, other ways to build up your resume. In South Korea, essentially there is no amount of resume you could build that will give you upward mobility, because you guys know how a lot of parents are so anal about being like, oh, you got to get into Ivy League because if you get into Ivy League, you'll be successful, right? That isn't necessarily true, right? You could be in an Ivy League and it doesn't mean you're going to get the fucking top tier job, right? But in Korea, the college or university you came out of essentially means everything, right? If you didn't come out of Seoul University, you are never going to get, considered for Samsung. Like, it isn't like, but I came out of New Jersey Institute of Technology. I could still get into Apple, right? You can in America. In Korea, nope. Oh, NJIT, lol. What kind of poor ass college is that? No, you got to be from the top college. It's like shit like that, Is the ceiling for those people the same if they want to work for another country? They would have to figure out a way to get out of Korea, which they might not make enough. So.
This was the generation that brought us K-pop, K-drama, K-food, and many other trends that spread around the world.
Are there no self-made millionaires like Bill Gates or Elon? No, there's some, but like those, you have to agree, right? Even outside of South Korea, self-made millionaires are not something that just pop up everywhere, right?
There will be just 5.6 million people in that age group, and they'll only be 16% of the population. Many cultural traditions are already struggling because the older generations are having trouble finding young people to pass them on to.
We're just talking about the point. I don't care who he gave
many traditions will die out. Without young people, the soul of South Korean culture will shrink and wither away. And on a personal level, what kind of experience will it be growing up in 2060? What will youth culture be like in a country of seniors, where many universities, schools and kindergartens are abandoned as there are no longer children to fill them with life? What kind of job prospects will they face, and what will politics look like? If young people don't want to remain alone, they'll concentrate in Seoul or a few other big cities, or worse for South Korea, emigrate to other countries. Rural areas will decline, and most smaller cities will turn into ghost towns. We're already seeing this in Japan, which has almost 10 million abandoned houses in rural areas. Large parts of South Korea will simply vanish and be reclaimed by nature. Last but not least, South and North Korea are technically at war, and they could very well still be in 2060. Will South Korea still be able to afford to have its young men do 18 months of mandatory military service?
That's a good fucking
Today,
point.
5% of men of combat age are enrolled in the military.
That's a good fucking
in 2060, it would have to be 15% just to match today's numbers. Okay, wait, this is all a bit much. Is there no way back? Why, there really is no way back. The problem with the demographic freight train is that once it hits, things become irreversible. Let's say fertility in South Korea magically triples to a replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman and stays there. In 2060, it will be an inverted pyramid on top of a barrel. And there would still be only 1.5 people of working age per senior over 65. Even in the best made-up scenario, South Korea has to pass through an unavoidable bottleneck before it will recover. But there is also a kernel of hope here. Yes, the situation is grim, but at least in the long term, recovery is possible if South Korea enacts rapid and societal changes that make its population want to have kids again.
Exactly.
In 2024, births rose for the first
They
time
have
in
to
9
literally
years,
change
3%
so
more than in
much.
2023. But for that to continue, South Korea needs to face the music and ask how they got to this point. How could it get that bad?
Fob, have you
In
done
general,
Genshin
as societies
GeoGuessr?
get richer,
It's
more
fun.
educated,
Yes, I have
and
done it a long
chances
time
of
ago.
Streaming
plummets,
too.
people decide to have
Thank you,
fewer
Boba Toy, for
kids.
the 15.
What makes South
Kashima
Korea
with
special
the
is that
raid.
it's somehow supercharging all of these trends. South Korea lifted itself out of poverty in record time, but in doing so it developed a unique kind of workaholism and extreme competitiveness. Although the work week is 40 hours and the legal maximum is 52 per week, unpaid overtime is normal for many, and the government even proposed to raise legal work time to 69 hours per week. Despite this, South Korea has relatively low wages and a high cost of living. Real estate in big cities is out of reach for most people. The cost of education is extremely high, since families have to pay for private lessons if they want to send their kids to a high-tier college. All of this while South Korea spends less on family benefits than most other rich countries. Old-fashioned cultural norms make matters even worse. Marriage is all but mandatory if a couple wants to start a family. In 2023, only 4.7% of babies were born to unmarried women. Out of all developed countries, South Korean men do just about the least share of housework and childcare within their families. This leaves women with a disproportionate amount of work if they want to keep their jobs after a pregnancy.
That's not me, chat. I clean the house. I fucking do the dishes. I do my part. All right. Listen, that's what I'm saying. All the issues of South Korea, it's all just a self-fulfilling prophecy, bro. What happens when your culture doesn't fucking get with the times, man?
While many men are overwhelmed by the societal expectation to be the main breadwinner and have successful careers. Starting a family or not is a personal decision, and most South Koreans are deciding against it. The bottom line is that South Korea has created a culture that leads to very few kids. Conclusion. Demographic collapse is not an abstract
Government
thing
could
in the
easily
future,
fix this shit?
it's
No, they
happening
can't.
right now. And it's not just South Korea.
It's not a government
In
like mandate
2023,
thing,
China
right?
had a
Unless
fertility
government's
rate
gonna
of
be like,
1,
you all have
Italy
to have
and Spain
kids or
1.2,
die.
Germany
right?
1.4, the
You
UK
can't do that.
1.6, and the US 1.6. Which sounds so much better, doesn't it? Well, after 4 generations, a fertility rate of 1.6 means 60% fewer new people. A fertility rate of 1.2 means 87% fewer people. And fertility rates are still falling with no sign of stabilization or recovery. The weirdest thing about all of this is that almost nobody involved in the public discourse has truly grasped the gravity of the situation. The last century was utterly dominated by overpopulation narratives, and people who say that we need more kids seem weird. And if you do the maths, the future just seems to be too insane to be true, like it's hard to believe. None of this has ever happened before. So, low birth rates are mostly discussed in the context of worker shortages, not as the existential threat to our societies, cultures, wealth, and our way of life that they are. If we don't take it seriously very soon and change the DNA of our modern societies in a way that encourages young people to start having children again, then the rest of the century will be pretty grim.
Yeah, I don't
for
know
those
if we
of us
can
who
do
will
that.
live through it. The demographic freight train stops for nobody. We finally need to realize that it's hurtling down the tracks right at us.
I feel like social media also
Multi-layered issues
compounds
like
on this
demographic
issue, you know?
change are hard to break through in our current media landscape and easy to miss out on. This is why we rely on ground news.
Like, I feel like with the rise of social media, I don't know, people have priorities on so many more things that are fucking useless, right? I feel like so many people nowadays with social media have this priority for internet updates and likes and retweets and and stuff like that. They're looking for gratification in the wrong places rather than trying to find gratification in tactile things and like things around them. They're looking for it in a digital space that does nothing for them outside of that, right? So it's like, fuck, man. So how do we convince everybody to come back to the real world, I mean, sure, you can say that about gacha games, but like, I mean, I don't think I'm to the point where I don't exist or have a life outside of gacha. I still do. All right. Now, granted, do I spend a lot of time after my gacha games playing dinosaur game? Yes, but right, if Lily is here, which she isn't unfortunately because she's in Korea right now, like I would still be making sure to spend time with her, go out, go places, stuff like that, etc. You know? Still don't have kids, bozo? Listen, I intend to fully have kids, but the issue is I don't think kids like it is something that they don't really brush up on this. I mean, they kind of do, I guess, but it's the cost of having kids that scares I think a lot of people as well in this economy, right? Like I don't know, man. Like, can you imagine the average
I
person?
am ready for ready fob.
Junior, think over to 51. Can you imagine the average person, right? Coming out of college, you have an insane amount of college debts you have to pay off, right? Now you have to meet someone, right? Now you've met someone, you still have that college debt, but then now you need to figure out how to get a house. Then after the house, you have to figure out how you're going to afford the kids it's just, there's a lot of fucking shit, a lot of hurdles before you get to the point of wanting to have kids. And I think they kind of brush up on it, but not entirely. I think there's just way more hurdles stopping people from wanting to have kids than there were so much longer ago, right? Like, and this isn't just South Korea only thing. I think it's just for everywhere. You basically already have a kid at Tori? Nah, like Tori doesn't cost that much. He's just food and like getting haircuts, and like I guess visiting the doctor once in a while. It's downright negligent to have a kid without being able to afford raising the kid. Exactly, and that's why I'm not rushing in to have a kid, right? Like Lily and I, when after we get married, right? We talked about this, right? If we decide to have kids and she wants 3, which I've told her fuck no, 2 max, right? But if and when we decide to actually have kids, it's not going to be till we actually have a house, right? I don't think, like, I don't know. I feel like you definitely need a house first before having kids, but not necessarily, but like at least somewhere that you like decide you're going to stay, whether you're renting or owning, Haymakers, I go to Prime, because at this point, Lily and I are pretty much still kind of jumping from apartment to apartment, stuff like that. We haven't really found a place, so no, 3 is perfect. I completely disagree. Every family I know where they have 3 kids, there's fucking issues way more than families that have 2, right? I think 2 is perfect, right? I think 3 is too much. 3 is always the eldest is the eldest in my experience, the eldest actually, and this is just coming off of Korean families I know, the eldest is always the one that the parents have the most hopes for, but then they kind of start, if they don't turn out the way the parents want exactly, the parents immediately move on to the next child and focus, and then the old one ends up really falling to the wayside and ending up in some fucked up shit, right? And then the youngest becomes the one that's doted on the most. The middle one gets a little bit, but like still, because it's the middle child, doesn't get as much, right? Like in my experience, the 3 families I know with 3 kids, the eldest is the most fucked up out of all of them. 2 of them I know literally do drugs, right? And the youngest out of them are always the most successful. The middle one just does whatever, right? So like, nah, man. Listen, there's 2 parents, 2 kids. Each parent focuses on a kid. Done. 3 kids, 2 parents. How the fuck do you, like you need to be really good parents to manage that properly. So